So it's been 18 months, 2 years that I've been doing this project, and things have come a long way. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a background as to where things came from. So started off, people may remember Pocket C.H.I.P. It was before the time of the Pi, 0 at least. It was a revolutionary computer in your pocket. As you can see here, it's a bit of a hefty beast. And I kind of wanted one, but couldn't actually get one at the time, so never ended up getting one back then, because I was always inspired by the old pocket computers of old, the old calculators that could do a little bit of coding, and a computer in your pocket was always a pretty cool thing to do. So once the Pi 0 came out, I started playing, sticking the Pi 0 with a screen, and then the kind of progression from there ended up as sticking a Pi 0 and a battery and a screen and a keyboard, and this was something I call clicker, but you can't guess why. So that kind of kept going for a bit. It was a bit awkward because the SPR pins on the Pi were shared with the screen, so then you couldn't really use hats properly because they were trying to use the same pins, and it was a bit of a mess. Then the compute module came out, so I kind of started thinking of ways to try and get this little compute module in place of the Pi to then use better screens and whatnot, and that all became complicated, to say the least. And then the project sat and nothing happened for a while. So I started rethinking about it 2 years, 18 months ago, and I thought, why do we really need a Raspberry Pi? Why not just use an ESP32? So this was the first board. So the idea was to use pin headers here instead of using the M2 slot, mainly because I didn't want to use a standard component in a non-standard way, because I don't want people plugging things into it and breaking things and stuff, but I've got over that because the idea worked, and this is the first design with the pin headers there. So the add-on card would just push onto the top, but the cards would then have lots of pins sticking out. They'd be hard to put in a pocket and easy to bend and easy to break and things like that. So I mean, this started off as a bit of a slab with a battery bin on the back, and it got refined a little bit to be a little bit nicer. The keys had legends on, but then that made them, because they were plastic, they were almost impossible to press, and the back got a bit of flair on it, some ridges, and made it look a bit nicer. It was all sort of clipped together at the front, screwed together at the back. If I can actually unclip it without breaking it. Perfect camera work here. Actually, I can't do that because I've just remembered there are screws beneath the battery holding it all together, so that's not going to work. So I changed from the M2 slot, not the M2, the pins there, and I decided to use the M2 slot instead. So this one had the M2 slot there, it's got some buttons on there. Things are pretty much the same on there. And then I also played around with the local printing place, Midlands 3D Prints. Check them out, they're really good. They started to use, they have a TPU, SLS printer, which meant that we could print these keyboard membranes, even with the detail of having the legends in them. So the keys were flexible and they worked. I can't show you because I've stolen the screens for other ones. And then we had the M2 slot in there, made the expansion better. But then while I was trying to develop the code on here, I realised that having arrow keys here and these power and reset buttons and things for the ESP were a bit awkward, and you could accidentally turn it off quite quickly, and it was all a bit of a mess. And the thing was clipped together. It's quite a nice case, to be honest. But it's clipped together on the back, and then the battery sat in this little frame that held little tiny screws, the smallest screws you've ever seen in your life, and they screwed into that faceplate, which isn't very thick to start with, and then the screw goes into a hole between the keys, which isn't very big at all, so it wasn't really very strong. It was all a bit floppy and all a bit creaky and not really the best design. It looked nice, but it didn't really work very well. So then I had the idea of just redesigning the front a little bit, so moving the keys across, the direction keys, and then I thought I can 3D print the main frame of it, but then put a faceplate, a PCB faceplate into the plastic, and that was all a bit floppy and bendy and not very good, and so I scrapped that and ended up with the final revision, well, say final, the current revision, that's got the M2 slot, the buttons up here so they're nice and easy to reach, and everything's all jiggled around on the back, but it's all held together by this TPU band around the middle, as you might have seen in my other videos, and it's as sturdy as you like. Pretty rugged, to be honest. I've dropped one from chest level and it's not even spotted, can't even see where it's dropped, so that's always good. And then, yeah, that's how we got to where we are today. So the next step is to try and make the power system a little bit more intelligent, try and shave a few costs, because I went a bit crazy with some of the chips that I've added in with regards to power and things like that. And that's where we got today. I also make a bit of a shout out. It's not necessarily a sponsored video, but the boards are all assembled by Maker Fabs over in China, so I'll probably add a link to them in the video description. So they do all the PCB assembly for me. You literally just send them all the parts and they'll ask you questions and make sure things fit and make sure things work, and that is really good, to be honest, and saves me having to spend hours and hours and hours trying to solder all these things on. I can just spend hours and hours and hours and hours trying to make it all nice again. So yeah, that's a bit of a look at things. Hope you enjoy.